Hi everyone. سیگرید عزیز، وقتی جوان بودم عاشق نامه نوشتن بودم. روزهایی بود که هنوز موبایل و اینترنت در ایران همه گیر نشده بود و من برای دوستانم نامه‌های طولانی می نوشتم و هر روز توی صندوق پست نزدیک خانه‌مان می انداختم. در آن نامه‌ها چیزی بود که نمی توانم با کلمه توصیفش کنم. چیزی که با حضور شبکه‌های اجتماعی و شتاب زدگی دنیای فست فودی دارد مثل دودوها منقرض می شود. Dear Sigrid, when I was younger, I loved writing letters. Back then, before mobile phone and the internet had taken over everyday life in Iran, I used to write long letters to my friends and drop them into the mailbox almost every day. There was something more to those letters, something I can't quite put into words, something that in this microwave society of ours, it is meeting the fate that the plodding dodo once did. Those trusting, gentle-hearted birds that never knew to flee from the pigs and humans. No, just sketches in the pages of history books. There was something in those letters that I'm hiding from extinction and marking it on treasure map in my heart. That's why even now, when I sit down to write a letter, my eyes light up again. The opportunity to reach out of another writer who, like me, has felt exile in every cell of her body and who never lost the hope of returning home. The opportunity to write to a writer I simply cannot help but love and respect. To ordinary people, we couldn't be more different. You embraced Catholicism, walked away from faith, and became an atheist. You lived through divorce, the death of a child, and the additional challenges of raising a disabled daughter. I've never married. I have no children. You wrote your masterpieces in a world into which I hadn't yet been born. You love nature, the quiet of rural life. I'm drawn of noise to modern cities and all their glorious chaos. In your writing, you reach back into Scandinavia's past. My stories and poems live in the now, in the aching disorientation of modern life. I could spend this whole letter naming the ways we are not the same. But what do those differences matter when something deeper binds us together? Something that led me here to write this letter to you with a tightness in my chest and tears threatening to fall. Both of us were forced to flee our homelands just to stay alive, cross snowy mountains, braving the dangers, hoping to build a home somewhere far from the one you lost. You miss home the way I do, thinking of joyful days that now seem lost in the fog. You went to America, a dreamland for many, but your heart stayed behind in Norway. When the war ended, you let go of that load, distant world, and returned to your beloved Lillehammer. And then, as if you had nothing left to do with the world of humans, you died. I, too, have left my heart on the other side of the world. It's been 9 years, and even here in this quiet, safe town, surrounded by forests and mountains, I'm still not happy. I still keep a suitcase in the closet. I always ready to go back. each year when I blow out my birthday candles in exile, I make the same wish to see Iran one more time and be allowed to die there. Back in Iran, I had a mentor we called Davar. Among ourselves, a name that means the judge in Persian. He was one of the most important satirists of our time, arrested again and again by the regime until he finally escaped Iran to Belgium, to Canada, to the US and beyond. He lived everywhere, but restlessness never left him. He was always a little lost, a little elsewhere, as if some part of him had stayed behind. At night, he'd call me drunk and crying, telling me how deeply he missed Iran. He told me he had shut the world out and built a little Iran of his own inside a tiny apartment. He said that he wrote and wrote and wrote just to forget how deeply he ached. He used to say he'd go back, even if it meant prison, as long as they let him live free for just a few months afterwards. Just one last taste of home before dying in peace. A few months ago, his daughter told us that Davar had taken his own life the night before. That's one of life's cruelest ironies, isn't it? That a man who brought laughter to others all his life could be so hollowed out by sorrow and despair. He'd die before ever reaching the one thing he longed for. That's one. That's when I finally understood why we had called him Davar. He had judged exile more truthfully than anyone else ever could. How could anyone judge such deep pain and still imagine anything but death at its end? He always used to tell me the ending is the most important part of any story. Write it first, in every detail, before anything else. He had written his ending some time ago, and those years he was just killing time until he got there. You must have felt the same secret. Even returning to your homeland couldn't bring you the peace you'd envisaged, and you didn't live long enough to witness Norway rise again from the ashes of war. It was while reading Happy Time in Norway, a book that ironically overflowed with sorrow, that I began thinking about exile, one of the strangest and most haunting concept I know. A condition that keeps returning unchanged no matter how times and place change, like a nightmare that visits again and again. Maybe that's why across so many we've told stories built around exile and displacement. Adam, cast out of paradise. Joseph, a king far from home, still aching for it. The Israelites, torn from their land. Jonah, thinking of home from the belly of a great fish. And countless other. Maybe exile is the most haunting idea we've ever known, second only to death itself. When you talk about missing your friend and family, I thought of my mother, how she used to cook for me with so much joy. After all these years, I can still remember the smell and the taste of her food. I thought of my students, how they used to gather at my home and how we'd spend whole days and nights reading poetry, watching films, getting lost in philosophical debates, wishing time would stop so we'd never have to leave one another. I thought of my best friend Ali, who called me from Iran on my birthday just 2 years ago. He said he missed me deeply and he had a feeling that this would be the last year of our separation. My brother, he told me, just hold on a little longer. This regime won't last. You're going to return to a free Iran and we'll laugh again like we used to. A few months ago, Ali died in his sleep of a heart attack. He was only 44. When I think of exile, I think of all the loved ones I've lost over the past 9 years. The funerals I couldn't attend, the goodbyes I never got to say. When you talk about missing the Norwegian language, it immediately made me miss the sound of Persian in the street, of browsing books in quiet bookshops, of hearing someone whisper a line of love in a dark alley, of the moments that belong of the part of a language no translation can ever hold. Translation is like trying to capture the magic of a girl's beauty. Word falter. You must hold her, kiss her, to feel her true beauty. For me, speaking my mother tongue is that safe embrace where beauty speaks and needs no words. In exile, you spoke English as fluently as you did Norwegian, but still you felt that something always got lost, something that makes one ache madly and helplessly. When I escaped from Iran to Iraq, and then to Turkey, I went days without hearing a single word of Persian. At the end of that journey, when smugglers were transferring us from one border town to another, I suddenly heard two Afghan teenagers talking in Persian at the back of the bus. They weren't saying anything special, maybe a frustrated complaint of grief, but I burst into tears and couldn't stop. It was as if I had found my homeland again in a shared language. You understood both that kind of pain and that kind of joy. That's why I'm certain you wrote Happy Time with tears in your eyes. When you talk about missing your home, your house in Lillehammer, your house, the one I once sat in for hours, crying until something inside me loosened. I saw of my own home in Iran. It wasn't much, just a few overflowing bookshelves, a big TV for watching films, and some worn leather sofa where my students had sat so many times that the covers had started to tear. In a large closet, I'd hidden my underground books and the rare magazine I'd once edited, suffered behind pillow and blankets. Nearby, there was an archive of DVDs and CDs filled with pillows, filled with films from around the world. My cat would roam happily from room to room. None of it exists anymore. The sofas were thrown out. The books and magazines and films were confiscated by the regime after my arrest. And my cat has died. Only the books from my shelves remain, gathering dust in a corner of my parents' house. The last trace of a home that vanished one day. like something swallowed by a storm. I miss that house. I want to go back, even though I can no longer call it home. You know this. You tried, but you couldn't feel at home again. Maybe exile takes a part of our hearts forever. Sometimes, as I walk through the street of Lillehammer, I ask myself, why can't people like us let go of the past? Why do we keep prodding the same damned wound until it starts bleeding all over again? Why do we stay trapped in the past, unable to let go of the people and memories, instead of moving on and building a life that's truly our own? And again, I return to exile, to Adam, cast out of paradise, haunted by sorrow, waiting for the world to end so he can go back. It doesn't matter if that story was faced for you and missed for me. What matters is that from thousands of years ago until today, people have believed exile is something you never truly get used to. You can try to forget, but the heart only finds peace when it goes home. And the bitter truth is, I no longer believe even going home would bring me peace. There's a hollowness now, something gone, and nothing left that could ever fill in its place. No, all I want is to go back, so that when I die, my students will have a grave to visit, a place where on quiet weekends they might sit for a while, read poems, shed a few tears, feel their hearts become a little lighter. Dear Secret, anyone reading this letter might feel disappointed. Maybe they expect something about the beauty of your story, or a tribute to your fight for freedom. But this letter is made of something else: ache and exile. You didn't know how to smile and write of life's beauty after losing your oldest child to war. And I don't know how to write poems about the gentle beauty of Musa while the news keep bringing word of friends imprisoned or killed back home. Exile, eat away at you quietly, like a slow and silent cancer. No matter how many painkillers you take, or how brightly you dress and force a smile, something inside you still keeps breaking down. There's nothing wrong with New York. Lord, full of dreams, alive in every way. And there's nothing wrong with Lillehammer. Quiet, safe, and beautiful. The trouble lies elsewhere, in the homeland we were forced to abandon, the one taken from us by dictators, a home you once loved, until one day soldiers come and took it from you. And really, what more does a writer ask of the world than a small room and a few blank pages to write one? Dear Secret, I've never been good at ending letters. I used to write to friends for hours and drop the letter into the mailbox near our house without ever bringing it to any particular end. Leaving a letter unfinished always gave me hope. Hope that there would be another one. Hope that the friendship would never end. Like waking in the middle of a sweet dream, sipping some water, checking your phone, then sleeping back into a sleep to find the same dream waiting for you. But I think this time I shouldn't leave the letter open ended, because This letter is a haunting embodiment of the pain you and I and thousands of others in exile have carried, because it's a half-finished nightmare we've woken from, breathless and in tears, and it must not go on. So I'll try to end it gently with hope, if not with peace, even if my heart is still heavy and my eyes are tired from crying. Dear Sigrid, Furuk, the most famous woman poet in modern Iranian history, once said in an interview, "Poetry for me is like a window that opens by itself whenever I approach it. I sit there, look out, sing, scream, cry, merge with the image of the trees, and I know that on the other side of the window there is a space, and someone is listening, someone who might exist 200 years from now, or who might have lived 300 years ago. And maybe here in exile, as the years start turning into double digits, one of the few comforting thoughts I have is this: when I open the window of my little home in Lillehammer, I know you once breathed this same air, that you're still here, somehow listening. You who were made of language and freedom and carried the full weight of sorrow in your bones. So I walked through Lillehammer, the place where you lived your only truly happy days. And I imagine a world with no dictators to drive anyone from their home, no borders to divide people and their kisses. And this letter ends right there, as I watch the seagulls flying above Lake Musa and think of you. With love, Mehdi.